From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this Father's Day weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Like father, like daughter, a farm transition put into motion early.
So obviously my dad is in the videos, and my dad is always a hit. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten a single negative comment about my dad.
How this 28-year-old is now carrying the 8th generation of their farm into the future. As milk prices tank.
Last year was close to almost $10 difference on the milk price.
Some farmers are even forced to dump milk. Our Farm Journal report looks into the muted mood of the milk markets and the tough reality for dairy farmers today. Drought concerns fuel the grain markets.
This is definitely a bona fide weather market.
And in John's world,
putting Crispr in the fridge.
producers in the Corn Belt are keeping an eye on the forecast this weekend, looking for any signs that relief from dryness is on the way. That's as drought concerns deepen. Taking a look at the latest root zone moisture map, you can see if we go back 1 month, moisture shortages start to show up in Iowa and in Nebraska and Oklahoma. There are also issues growing in the north central part of the country into Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. The National Drought Mitigation Center shows the drought now covers 57% of the U.S. corn crop and 51% of soybeans. And topsoils, those across the country, are continuing to get drier. Nationally, 46% of topsoil is reported as being short to very short of moisture. That's up 2 points from last week. Midwest topsoils, those are especially hard hit.
The range in the Midwest is from 35% very short to short in North Dakota, your so-called wettest state in the Midwest, all the way up to 91% in Michigan.
In fact, every Midwest state east of the Mississippi is reporting 70% of its topsoil as being short to very short, and the dryness extends into the mid-Atlantic, with Maryland 96% short to very short. Brad Rippey says dryness is also starting to creep up in the Pacific Northwest. The Federal Reserve announcing its decision to keep interest rates unchanged this week, while also signaling 2 more rate hikes are likely yet this year. The interest rate decision broke a streak of 10 straight meetings where the Fed announced a hike, but they say another 0.5 percentage point hike is likely before the end of the year. The decision to pause the rate hikes this month was due to a slower decline in inflation, but also a stronger than expected economy. But financial experts telling me the rate increase is already having a heavy impact on farm operating costs today. On average, farmers are dealing with an 8.25% prime rate, which is high compared to recent history. Big news for the beef industry this week, with Walmart officially announcing a plan to build a case-ready beef facility in Kansas. It would be built in Olathe, which is actually just down the road from our studios here in Lenexa. The company saying in a release that this would be the first owned and operated case-ready facility. It says it's set to break ground later this year and would create more than 600 Walmart jobs in the Olathe area. Once open, it says the new facility in Kansas will package and distribute a selection of Angus cuts from sustainable beef in North Platte, Nebraska. It would serve stores across the Midwest. The facility is slated to open in 2025. And some good news for exports. West Coast port operators and dock workers have reached a tentative labor agreement. Union leaders releasing a statement saying the 6-year contract covers workers at all 29 West Coast ports. It brings an end to a year-long labor negotiation that at times led to work stoppages that slowed cargo movement. The U.S. Meat Export Federation calling it tremendous news.
A huge percentage of our business, especially value-added chilled business, which is our highest value business for both beef and pork, goes off the West Coast for our Asian markets, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China. These exporters and importers in these countries rely upon a certainty for stability in terms of their shipping logistics. And before this agreement was reached, there was a large level of uncertainty.
The unions still need to ratify the deal, which could take several weeks, but port operations are expected to return to normal. A big merger in the ag industry. Bunge is officially buying Viterra. The combined company will create a trading giant capable of competing with the biggest players in agriculture. They'd be worth a combined $34 billion. It's expected to boost Bunge's grain and softseed handling capacity while expanding origination capabilities in key regions and crops where Bunge is underrepresented. The deal is expected to close in the middle of next year. Canada is joining the U.S. in taking on Mexico's proposed ban on GMO corn. The country says it will join a trade dispute panel over the issue. The panel was officially requested by the U.S. Trade Representative's office earlier this month. That's after ongoing talks with Mexico failed to yield a solution. Mexico has a plan to ban GMO corn for human consumption in the country and possibly from animal feed as well. But the U.S. and Canada say that would damage trade and violate the USMCA agreement. The trade dispute panel could take about half a year to study the complaint before releasing its findings. Well, drought concerns did grow this week, and the seasonal outlook for drought is not promising when it comes to the eastern Corn Belt. We'll have a check of your forecast coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing, the widest cross conveyor in its class, 28 feet of full continuous merging, and merge up to 5 16-foot windrows into one in either direction. That's what you get with the H&S 6128 Twin Flex merger. Find out more at the H&S website.
It's time now for a check of weather with meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht. Joining us from South Bend this weekend, Matt, USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey is calling it a cool drought. But as we look ahead, there are some warnings of possible record-breaking heat next week. Where's the heat expected to hit?
Yeah, Tyne, you're looking at that extended forecast into next week, and you start to see the extreme heat show up in two places. One is going to be in and over Texas, where they're expecting a triple-digit heat. Now, that's not the heat index, that's the actual temperature, and then well above normal temperatures back up into Wisconsin and Minneapolis and even into Minnesota and portions of North and South Dakota. A little bit cooler with a ridge building back off here towards the west. Low pressure system bringing some cooler air or below average temperatures this week for parts of North Carolina, Virginia, and even in South Carolina and Georgia in the southeast. The updated root zone map shows you that we're doing a lot better with the drought into parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and then back up into the Dakotas, but still seeing some dryness back into the Midwest. Specifically, check out Michigan, where we continue to see some very dry conditions working all the way here towards the east. Pennsylvania and Ohio, we're starting to get into the very dry, if not extremely dry category, back up into the northeast as well as into North Carolina. So the precipitation outlook doesn't look all that great for those areas that are significantly dry. Rather, it's going to be where the cooler air is located in parts of North Carolina and south, and with possibility of some wetter than normal conditions between June 20th and June 24th, and then back up into the Dakotas, where we really don't need any more rain, or there isn't an extreme drought in those locations. That's where we'll start to see the rain. Where that drought is starting to show up into the Midwest, we continue to keep this at or below drier than normal conditions into parts of Illinois, Michigan, as well as Indiana and Wisconsin. As we extend this out even more, June 22nd to June 28th, things become a little bit more favorable for that rain to extend more towards the east in the Dakotas and into Minnesota and Minneapolis as well, and along the East Coast. That's where that big shift starts to come into play, not necessarily this week, but next week. The one thing that is going to be tough to shake, though, the above average or the above normal temperatures across the United States. As we looked at just a little bit ago, that heat is continuing to build. The jet stream, after we get through this weekend, there's the ridge building, and the reason why we have the heat back into Texas and back up here towards the north. Next piece of energy is back out here to the west. That should help with some of those rain chances that we looked at on some of those maps just a little bit ago.
Thanks, Matt. Well, weather again fueling the markets this week, but is there more to that story? We have Garrett Toy as well as Sam Hudson joining us to break down the markets. That's next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Garrett Toy as well as Sam Hudson joining us. All right, when you look at this week, we saw some up days, a down day, and then some more up days. Is this market right now for the grains, Garrett, truly weather driven?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we took a little break midweek just because we had the Federal Reserve decision making. It just felt like the markets were just kind of taking a break from their normal discourse. But this is definitely a bona fide weather market. Midweek, we started to get into some long-term trend lines that we pushed through. And now I think you're going to see some either full-hearted fun buying coming in here or the rest of the shorts are going to be covering.
Yeah, Sam, on Thursday, we saw just some ferocious action in the grain markets. We saw the drought monitor come out. Nearly 60% of the corn is in drought. Over half of the soybeans are in drought. Is it the drought monitor have any impact, or is it truly just these future forecasts that traders are watching?
Yeah, it's more the forecast. I mean, we already know it's dry. I think that's part of it is timing. You got a 3-day weekend, and we've stretched these, 2-week forecasts 3 or 4 different times now, it seems like. And at this point, we've come to a point where if it doesn't happen, you're going to have some irreparable damage on some of these crops. And it's not just, that we're dry. It's the location. Everyone wants to talk about 2012 in comparison to this and that. But if you look at it objectively between Indianapolis and really Fargo or even Des Moines, some of those areas are the highest producing counties that we have in the country. And if you continue to stretch that out, beyond July 4th, it becomes a real problem in terms of trying to nail down where production is. And as Garrett said, there were some shorts in the corn market. You could cover those, not a ton, but it's going to happen at a time where farmers are going to get nervous about selling if it gets extended and there's nobody that's going to be on the other side of it.
Garrett, I'm sure you're hearing it too. A lot of farmers right now trying to compare it to something, hearing a lot of 2012. But the markets, the drought, everything, is this set up? Is 2012 an accurate comparison?
There are some comparisons to 2012. I mean, I think if you look at the percentage of the Corn Belt that is 30-day dryness is pushing 80%. That's comparative to June, late July 2012. As it stands right now, you're looking at the fourth driest June since 1960. And the second driest April to June time period since 1960 is 1960 as well. 1988 is still the number one. So you've got some comparisons in 1988 there as well. But, if you listen to the forecasters out here, nobody really seems to, you've got two different sides. You've got people that are on the back half saying, well, this doesn't look to be a long-term thing. In 2012, we knew that this was kind of coming, or we saw this coming for a while before the market reacted to this sort of thing. And then you have others that are like, well, like Samuel said, is that, we've had 2 weeks ago, we were looking for a potential pattern change and that never developed. And then you have this ridge in the Southwest, and we know the drought in the Southwest has been going on year 2 now. If we can't pull moisture out of there. So that's an issue that we have to deal with. But I think the fact of the matter is that, we've never really seen anything like this. I mean, it's not, there's some comparisons to 2012, there's some comparisons to 1988, but this is 2023. And my worst fear is that, if it's not a drought, that we come in off of a 3-day weekend like this weekend or 4th of July weekend, and all of a sudden we've got 1-inch rains across the Corn Belt, and this thing just falls apart considering the demand prospects.
Yeah, in talking with USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey this week, he called it a cool drought, Sam. I mean, you look at some of even the cold weather that hit and the cold weather impact on some of the northern states and some of the crops. It is so unusual. So could that cool weather help kind of, protect some of that top end yield? And do you think that could catch up to us in the markets as well?
No, it's certainly possible. And one of the things feeding into that could be the fact that we've had such low dew points here, really since the beginning of summer, whenever you want to mark that. And so a little bit easier to get cold temperatures, to affect things, even if it's not all the way down to freezing. But I think even around here, especially, it's really helped, things along at night for the plant to get a chance to rest. But peak water usage is 2-3 weeks away, 2-4 weeks away, depending on where you're at here. And so even if it is going to start raining, we're going to need to have consecutive rains to, fill out still that potential that's still there. And so we are going to get a little bit of a push in heat today, but it certainly helped things again. We just have to have rain at some point still.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about drought, but what hasn't gone away is the demand problem. And we saw that in WASD last week. So we'll take a closer look at demand coming up here on U.S. Farm Report. While the debate over GMO corn and the dispute with Mexico is only heating up, the GMO debate may be cooling down here at home. Here's John Phipps.
Public apprehension over genetically modified organisms has slowly kind of dissipated as an abundance of non-GMO offerings have been made available to consumers. One major concern was the transference of genetic material between species. These transgenic mutations made some consumers uneasy, but they also made GMOs detectable. Soon, simple and rapid tests could make sure if, say, corn was GMO or not. Such detectability is crucial. Compare this situation to organic, for example, where the only criterion for proof was essentially the word of the producer, backed by paperwork and inspections and other oversight, not a laboratory test. Science has moved on. Using a genetic engineering tool with the handy name of CRISPR-Cas9, breeders can now alter genes without using transgenic material. This is essentially the same method as conventional plant breeding, only capable of targeting a specific gene segment instead of waiting for an identical natural mutation to occur and be sorted out. CRISPR results are identical to results from conventional breeding. Without outside material involved, it is impossible to differentiate between conventional and CRISPR results. Food activists may still object, but recent scandals in the organic food industry verification system suggest trying to discriminate against CRISPR products will be impossible, or at least worse than the current shaky organic regime. It would also make no sense or calm anybody's fears. Gene alterations occur constantly from natural causes such as background radiation, gene replication errors, and traditional breeding, evidenced by the importance of pedigrees in breeding livestock. When this genetic tool first began getting attention, I wrote about it in Top Producer. I was a little too enthusiastic 6 years ago about when the first fruits of this work would show up in supermarkets. It is happening now, and one of the first foods to be improved is, sadly, mustard greens. The new varieties are less bitter, I guess, but then I'm far from a salad aficionado. My hope is we could finally solve some of the more pressing vegetable issues, like shippable tomatoes with August garden juiciness and flavor. Meanwhile, consumers may be, knowingly or not, storing one of the most advanced scientific discoveries of our age in their refrigerators. In other words, we'll be putting CRISPR in the crisper.
Thanks, John, and happy Father's Day. All right, when we come back, a special Tractor Tales this weekend as two proud dads show off their prized tractors. Machinery Pete has Tractor Tales next.
Your next piece of equipment is on machinerypete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on machinerypete.com.
Hey, welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we have a special Father's Day surprise for you. We're off to Ohio to check out a semi-retired John Deere LI and a Minneapolis Moline Z from two proud dads.
This is a John Deere LI. It belonged to a cousin of mine who got it in Phoenix, Arizona.
Moline Z, my father's second tractor. Bought it new, never been away from the farm. It had a barn that was set up for 8 mules. That was a major effort for him. Do the work that he didn't want to have to hand crank to start it.
It originally came from Pickaway Township here in Pickaway County in Ohio. Chuck's dad actually operated this tractor mowing roads in Pickaway Township. He found it and it was out west. He got a hold of it. It was restored, and he's had it in his possession for all these years.
Just general farm work. I'm sure raked hay with it. We had neglected it for a couple years and realized that wasn't right. So you see what it is now.
Chuck decided he's getting older and he wanted to give this tractor to me and my son Eric because he wanted someone that appreciated old iron and would take care of it. It's been well appreciated by this family, and it would probably continue to be so. A lot of local growers, pumpkin growers, now compete to get the largest pumpkin. Then on Thursday night of the pumpkin show, they have a parade. My son, Eric Atwood, drove it through the parade.
What's it mean just knowing we still got something nice out of the past, out of my father's past, I guess. Now it doesn't sit outside. My wife's van can sit outside, but not this.
It's important to me. It's part of my history. I've always loved tractors. I loved old iron. It's got family roots back to my family.
Those were great. Thanks, Greg. Well, June is National Dairy Month, but there's not much for dairy farmers to celebrate right now. We'll tell you why in our Farm Journal report next.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, June is Dairy Month, but this year there's not as much for U.S. dairy producers to celebrate. Milk prices have plummeted, and some are even having to dump milk. Michelle Rook looks at how much prices have fallen and why the market is now flooded with milk.
Milk prices have fallen substantially from some of the record prices dairy producers saw in 2022. After hitting a record high for Class 3 fluid milk in April 2022 at nearly $26, spot month milk futures have plunged to new contract lows, hitting $14.93 per hundredweight on Thursday.
Last year was close to almost $10 difference on the milk price, and right now we're overproducing from the processing side and for the use side.
With the flooded milk markets, much of the upper Midwest processing capacity is maxed out, and some producers have even had to dump milk. A Minnesota dairy producer sharing this video on June 2nd.
Processing plant can't handle all the milk from everybody apparently, for a couple of reasons. They have too much apparently, and they can't get nobody to work. So they can't get nobody to process the milk. So the hauler picked it up and he's taking and dumping it in a field right now.
Unfortunately, processors don't see any signs of when the tide is going to turn. The glut of milk is coming from overproduction, plus fluid milk sales have declined dramatically, especially with schools closed for the summer. Exports have also slowed off their record pace.
Our extra milk that we produce every year, year over year increase in milk, 90+% of that has to be exported. And so we need to continue to work and drill so that we can move more product.
With the current low milk prices and high feed costs, that puts many dairy operations below the cost of production.
Well, if you want to use $15.50 as your mailbox price, you're losing $5-6 a hundredweight anyway, and it may be even more, depending on when you put in your silage. If you were buying it last fall and corn prices were really high.
As a result, dairy margin coverage and dairy revenue coverage insurance payments kicked in at the start of the year, but it doesn't make producers whole.
It helps a little bit, but it's more for if you have less cows. For us, we do DRP, that's another insurance, and that's better for us than the DMC.
USDA has tried to shore up the market recently, buying $47 million of cheese, but just how much will that help?
Is it enough to really push the market? I doubt it myself, but then it only takes that very top extra that will push the market down. So we hope that it will have a positive influence.
2022 is a very profitable year, so there hasn't been much cow liquidation yet. But if milk prices remain low, some operations may be forced to cull.
We don't have the 200 cows, 50 cow herds to lose to go down on numbers. It's all going to be up to the producers that are here that will have to reduce the number of cows in our herd and tighten up that way, because we get down to a certain point, there isn't enough producers to lose anymore in this part of the world.
And there's more incentive to cull with the strong beef cattle market. So the hope is that will slowly help the market rebound, and many operations will be able to ride out the storm.
It's important to understand that dairy is a long-term sustainable business. We go through the ups and the downs of the business and the market, but these are extravagant businesses that know how to manage their monies and can handle those trends.
I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
As Michelle showed you, one Minnesota farmer was forced to dump milk last week, taking to social media to share that story. Coming up later in the show, we'll talk to him firsthand. But first, Brazil is set to take the helm as the top corn exporter in the world. What does that mean for the U.S.? We'll ask analysts next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Garrett Toy and Sam Hudson rejoining us. All right, we focused a lot on supply in the first roundtable, talking about drought, talking about future impacts and this weather rally. But Garrett, when you look at the latest WASDE adjustments and the problems that we've been having with demand, it seemed like USDA signaled those demand problems are not going away.
And I think the most important thing, especially when we've got a bona fide weather market here, is this June stocks and acreage report, where either the USDA can throw water on this rally or gasoline, depending on what acres show or if there's a surprise in stocks. But as far as demand is concerned, we know the Brazilian crop is big. We know that even in the face of this Ukraine-Russian conflict, that their offers, even with them out of the market, Brazil is taking over the lead there. In fact, last month, where Brazilian corn harvest is in its infancy, China took 100,000 tons of corn from them. And the corn export program to China out of Brazil is already restarted. So the thing that scares me is that our export new crop demand is poor. Brazilian corn offers are $20 to $40 a ton cheaper than ours through October, November. In October, November, that's our harvest. That's when we need to be selling corn, and Brazil is still going to be there undermining our demand.
Yeah, when you look at corn exports specifically, I mean, we're hearing a lot of talk that Brazil could actually top the U.S. as the top corn exporter, Sam. Looking at some of those numbers that Garrett just said, is that possible?
Oh, I don't see why not. But we have to also recognize what filters into that. It's not only them growing their market and supply and being able to find a price where it's more attractive to world buyers, but it's also the tight domestic situation that we've had here in the U.S. over the past year. And we could see a complete repeat of that again this year. It just may be in the central corn belt instead of the west. All the bushels we railed west, we may be begging back for here if we don't get a rain in a couple weeks. And so I think that's definitely something to think about as you go into harvest too, because we got to fill the pipeline still. And as Garrett was saying, there may not be a whole lot of carry from harvest to December this year. I think the real pain comes probably January, February, March of next year. If we can raise this crop and we've got a good prospect in South America, that's where you could really see some much lower prices. But we have to get these rains. And until then, I think the market's going to show that it's scared.
If you are a feed user, Garrett, what advice do you have?
I think you got to be patient here, depending on these forecasts. This is a supply-driven rally, not a demand-driven rally. From a farmer standpoint, from a producer standpoint, it's a rally that needs to be sold. I know it's difficult. This is going to be a difficult year. We have high input costs. We have high interest rates. We have no demand, and we have a potential of a drouthy situation. From an end user standpoint, though, they need to be patient. From a hog producer standpoint, from a cattle producer standpoint, with all-time highs in here and new crop feeder prices where they're at, be careful as far as getting caught on an uptick in price.
Sam, and we touched on it briefly, but at the end of the month, we have quite a few reports coming out from USDA. When you look at acreage, you look at grain stocks, there's a lot to watch. But what do you think traders will be watching the most closely this year?
Well, it'll be both, but I don't know that you can make a huge argument on the acreage side of things. There was a lot of concern, including with myself here, back up to March, when you had all that snowpack in the Dakotas in terms of getting, wondering if we were going to get in. And then they finally did get in. And since then, they haven't seen any rain either. And so I don't know if the area is going to be a problem unless it becomes a harvested acreage issue at the end of the year. The stocks, I'm not big on this, but I'm not a huge believer USDA stocks are as large as what they say they are. I think that's part of the problem in our export program. We just don't have a lot available to ship out of here. And the only time you ever really see them pull that curtain back is when we get into a production problem.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Garrett, Sam, thank you so much. Happy Father's Day to both of you. We need to take a quick break and then a special Father's Day story out of Ohio. That's next.
Tyne's Women of Ag is brought to you by John Deere, who celebrates the strength and resilience of the women who make farms run.
Well, father and daughter often share a special bond, but for the Kents in Ohio, that bond also created an opportunity of a lifetime. This Father's Day weekend, we introduce you to Zoe Kent, in our ongoing series featuring women of ag. Whether it's her humor,
I can't wait for like 20, 30 years from now when I'm that old person on the farm that's like, well, back in my day.
her hard work, or her unfiltered take on being a farmer today. At 28 years old, Zoe Kent is smashing stereotypes everywhere she turns.
I'm the 8th generation. I kind of like to say that they moved here and then we just never left.
And as a little girl, Zoe says she always dreamed of being a farmer when she grew up.
I can't remember a time that I didn't want to farm. I think there was one time in 5th grade that I wanted to be a hairdresser. My parents steered me away from that. I couldn't cut in a straight line to save my life.
As she got older, she kept grabbing the wheel of more jobs on the farm, even running the combine and working ground throughout high school.
My senior project was learning how to do all of the bookwork at the farm, which luckily in 2013, it was a good year, so it enticed me to come back.
But her mom was adamant. With 3 kids, she wanted them all to get an education and explore opportunities off the farm.
My mom has always put a big value on education in our house, so I knew I was going to get a college degree, so I went to Ohio State.
While at Ohio State, Zoe tackled an ag business degree while also cheering. Zoe enjoyed the college life, but she still knew farming is where she wanted to be.
I have 2 siblings. None of us ever were like pressured to come back to the farm in any way. But of course, when I said that I wanted to come back, my dad was very excited.
She also worked on the farm during the summer and after graduation, finally returned home to farm full-time.
We formed the LLC in 2019, and then 2021, Dad decided he was ready to retire, so I bought him out. So this is my 2nd year of owning the farming operation.
Transitioning the farm was always part of the plan, but the timing of that transition was not.
It happened faster than we were expecting it to. First, when we set out, we thought, okay, we're gonna run as partners for 5 years and then begin the transition.
When a neurological genetic condition created health headwinds for her dad, Mickey, their plan changed.
Dad didn't have a hip for 7 months, and so it was a long process of him not being able to do a lot of things physically, and I was taking on a lot of those roles.
The two also knew if she bought the farm early, Mickey would still be around for advice and guidance for years to come. And today, these two are inseparable.
I genuinely just really like hanging out with my dad.
Mickey is also a fan favorite among Zoe's more than 200,000 followers on social media.
So obviously my dad is in the videos, and my dad is always a hit. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten a single negative comment about my dad.
Her Farm with Zoe Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok accounts have become wildly popular in just 2 years.
Had you told me 2 years ago I'd be doing that, I wouldn't have thought that to be a thing.
The idea was planted by a college friend, and that's when Zoe decided to give social media a try.
I have some specific boundaries I set. I don't show my family because I want to keep the focus on the farm. I was intentional that I was never going to do my hair and my makeup to film a video.
Instead, Zoe wants people to have an authentic look at life on the farm today.
But of course, when you decide to share online, you're gonna get feedback from anyone and everyone. I know I've kind of opened myself up to that. I will get the occasional just dumb comment from someone that thinks I couldn't possibly know how to drive a tractor and that my dad's just doing all the work behind the scenes for me and I'm jumping in to take a video.
Instead of getting knocked down by the negativity that comes with social media, Zoe uses those comments as fuel.
And sometimes those comments actually get turned into the best videos I make because, you know, it kind of fires me up a little bit.
Zoe's dealt with doses of dubiety since she started farming.
I would get comments in the beginning. Oh, you must be your dad's secretary, or it's nice that your dad's letting you hang out. Everyone that I work with daily understands that I'm capable of doing all of the things I need to do on the farm.
Still, she doesn't get caught up in stereotypes or labels of being a female farmer. She chooses to empower others to be their best and enjoy all facets of the farm.
What's your favorite thing that you do at your job? For me, one top 3, hauling grain.
She also surrounds herself with a good team.
I have one mostly full-time employee, JD. He is my mechanic. I am not good with a wrench, so he keeps everything in working motion. really thankful for him.
And as an 8th-generation farmer, Zoe's goal is to be able to pass Kent Farms on to the next.
My parents never put pressure on me, and they've never once said, this must continue for centuries to come or anything like that. But yeah, I do feel a pressure.
Adding her own flair with social media while farming full-time with her father by her side.
If I hadn't grown more, there wouldn't have been as much opportunity for you to take over and for me to retire.
A special bond that uncovered an opportunity for Zoe to come back and farm, as Zoe cherishes the journey and her father's greatest gift, the unwavering belief she could.
I don't think I'd change a thing.
What a special bond they have. Thank you, Zoe. And if you have a woman of ag that you think we should feature, we want to hear about her. Email us at mailbag@usfarmreport.com, and we'll continue the series throughout the year. All right, up next, John's recent commentary drew out some severe critics of AI. Customer support is next.
Is AI really intelligence?
There's a lot of talk about how AI will be used in agriculture, but is AI even real? Here's John Phipps.
Frequent correspondent Jay Brown from Ravenna, Ohio, is skeptical of artificial intelligence, AI. I could take issue with every point you made, but instead I will give you the only truth. There is no artificial intelligence now or in the foreseeable future. Mashing up Siri search and databases is not AI. Just sophisticated programs doing what they are programmed to do, nothing more. Many people share your dismissal, but often it is centered on the name of the technology itself. The term artificial intelligence was first used in the early 1950s and rapidly became a standard expression for science fiction writers. Even in the beginning, few agreed exactly on what it meant. One big issue is the confusion with sentience or self-awareness. That is a whole nother scientific and philosophical issue. Today, the AI industry avoids that implication, but the image of the Star Trek character Data pops into mind. Worse still, the suggested alternative terms like machine learning and LLMs, large language models, don't really clarify matters much, so the concept of AI is pretty much in the eye of the beholder. As far as intelligence, there is a widely used standard, the Turing test, first proposed by the mathematical genius of World War II, Alan Turing. The test is simple. If during a conversation you cannot identify a human from a machine response, you are dealing with intelligence. This criterion would appear to be approached and often met by current generation chatbots such as ChatGPT-4. When AI programs began beating the world's best Go players, the common comment from those masters was the victories were due to moves never imagined in the centuries this game has been played. Those moves were not programmed, and only the goal, winning, and rules were. To the extent that AI is simply a mashup of search and logic software with extensive memory, how greatly different is that from a basic description of how our brain works? We use logic to reach conclusions and formulate actions about things we know or experience. AI is already close enough to human capability that creative occupations, from copywriters to commercial artists to programmers, are being laid off in thousands, and computer engineering graduates are stunned by the lack of entry-level jobs. My judgments are also based on the same logic as EVs. That's where the money is going. Perhaps some individuals do know the only truth, as Jay puts it, but the owners of hundreds of billions of dollars clearly embrace other conclusions.
Thanks, John. Well, earlier in the show, we showed you the down dairy market and the impact on dairy farmers from coast to coast. But why are some being forced to dump milk? It's a question we ask one dairy farmer next. Well, it's a story that actually started late last week. Farmers in the Midwest forced to dump milk. And out of frustration, one dairy farmer took to social media to bring the issue to light.
It's been real stressful lately. I mean, with the price dropping and everything. And it was finally, I was like, you know what, I've had enough. I think people need to see what's going on. The farmers are working their tail off 24/7, and then something comes up and we have to dump it.
We caught up with Mitch Thompson this week, more than a week after he was first told he would need to dump his milk. And keep in mind, as a dairy farmer, the cows must be milked every day, even if the milk is dumped in a field nearby. The situation was fairly isolated to just a few processors, and it happened during a span of about a week. But he is concerned it could happen again.
I think there's, a labor issue. Some of them have labor issues, some of them don't. And I think there's just a lot of aging plants, aging processors as well, that, it's just really hard really expensive to update them and keep them running at peak efficiency. And I think it's just becoming a big issue across the board.
Thompson says he's received messages with people asking why he can't donate the milk, but it's not that simple. He says due to food safety concerns, the milk has to go through a processor. Plus, the milk he's dumping is straight out of the tank. It hasn't even been bottled yet. But he says if people want to help, there is one way they can, and that's to drink more milk. That does it for U.S. Farm Report this Father's Day weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to tune in next weekend as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.